right, March Madness is officially here. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us here on the Subaru of Las Vegas Sports Wrap. It's estimated that between 57 and 62 million people will fill out a bracket. Hello, I'm Chris Maathuis.
That's a lot of people, Chris Maathuis. Well, I'm Alexis. It's also race weekend in Las Vegas. A live report from the Speedway coming right up.
All right, but first, we got to talk about the NCAA tournament, and joining us to break it all down here is, of course, the host of the Sports Wrap Daily, Darrell Harris. And Darrell, when you look at these brackets, it's so interesting when you think about who's the number one, who's the number two, who's going in. Number one seeds and conference tournament title winners don't all of a sudden necessarily mean you're going to get to a Final Four.
No, not at all. And you have to revisit history. If you look last year, all of those one seeds did make it, though. But also, this is a very different NCAA season. We're seeing a lot of players stay longer, so they're a little more experienced in the NIL era. It's also a really good freshman class. So we got a batch of talented teams that are about to perform and put on a good show, I believe.
You know, and you mentioned when you talk about these brackets and those number one seeds and the conference tournament and so forth, 25, as you mentioned, 2025, only one other time of the four number ones made it to the Final Four.
Well, we know that March Madness is just full of surprises. That's what makes March Madness so fun. Any surprises in the seedings that you look up and down the bracket?
Yeah, no, we're getting started in the East, and Duke, no surprise, first overall. That is the top dog. I think that the Boozer boys are prepared to take that team far. I do think that there are some upset candidates throughout this bracket, specifically in the West region. I think the West has a dog that you should be watching in Hawaii, and I also think Utah State could upset some teams.
Ooh, Mountain West.
Yeah, I would love to see that. And then I have a really long shot for you guys. This Queens program, in their first year of existence, they've got a 15 seed. They're going to face Purdue. Braden Smith, one of the best point guards in the nation. However, this Queens team has 6 different players averaging double figures. That is hard to game plan against, and that is the makings of one of these Florida Atlantic schools or one of those Loyola Chicago possible Cinderella teams.
Let's go to the West bracket now. We look at the West. It's going to be interesting when you think of these teams in the West. Of course, the number one seed Arizona, winner of the Big 12 regular season and postseason, and you mentioned Purdue.
Yeah, no, Purdue's they were mighty all year, but that's the wild card right there in the middle. They're facing an undetermined opponent, but BYU coming in at the 6th spot is going to get either Texas or NC State. We know AJ DeBance. It always helps to have that firepower on your side. He's probably the best player in the country, projected first overall pick. If you can't stop him, how are you going to get anywhere past BYU? So we shouldn't sleep on BYU just because they had a tough regular season in that Big 12.
Let's pull the West back up if we can for just a moment, because I want to see the Mountain West champion. Utah State was in there. So the
only Mountain West representative. You called it, Chris.
That was
one
crazy.
Bid conference this year.
One bid conference, which is absolutely stunning. They're going to play Villanova. Also in there, Hawaii's coming over to the Mountain West, but they're the Big West. They're going to play in the West region.
They're going against Calipari in Arkansas. They got this kid, Darius Acuff Jr. He is incredible as a scorer. However, Hawaii brings a really unique approach to the tournament because they don't do this. They have this scheme where they don't do help defense, and it challenges the other team to do this isolation game, which you're not taught to do. So I'm curious to see if the Rainbow Warriors, who won the Big West in Las Vegas, can knock off John Calipari in the first round of the tournament. That would be incredible.
Well, let's look at the last 4 in. There was the first 4 out, the first 4 in. Let's take a look at that little, those 4.
Miami, Ohio.
They made it, unbeaten except for in the tournament. But
yeah,
here we are right here. This is the first 4. What do you think?
Yeah, no, Miami, Ohio, I don't want to write them off either. They finally got a loss on their record, so that might have been a big sigh of relief that we don't have to come in and be this perfect team. However, that is a team that has executed from the beginning of the season to that one loss in the conference finals, but they drew the attention of everybody. I think that they want to prove themselves, but SMU won't be easy.
Well, we talk about the first 4 out. Guess who was on that list? San Diego State. San Diego State does not get in.
I got to ask you before we go, Darrell, last quick update. WNBA, I know they're in day 6 of negotiations. The commissioner said Friday night, we have to have a decision by Monday in order to make sure that there are no distractions, no differences on the agenda when it comes to the preseason agenda. But here we are in day 6, multiple hours of the day in negotiations.
Yeah. No, these things are happening nonstop, wall to wall, all day and night, essentially. Since that March 10th deadline that the league imposed was the final chance to get a deal without pushing back the start date, well, that's came and gone. As of right now, I have no idea if our Las Vegas Aces will be able to defend their championship. They're saying that they tried to knock out some of the ancillary topics earlier in these discussions, and now all they're trying to settle on is the revenue sharing. That's coming out of Front Office Sports, out of ESPN, and all of the reporters who are out there in New York City for these wall-to-wall meetings. However, that's the biggest part that they're at odds with. So if they can't agree, a strike is certainly very much still on the table. That start date, I believe, is already compromised.
And you want to think about it too, you guys. You got the draft and you got the expansion draft. There's so much that has to happen before you actually get a season going.
Yeah, and it's all supposed to happen in less than 24 hours. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, no, I'm fingers crossed we could get an update at any point. We'll keep you posted on Sports Wrap Daily all week long. We've been talking about it each and every day because something could change, and this is monumental. It's Women's History Month. We want to see, a positive headline at the end of these negotiations to celebrate. We'll keep our eye on it.
Well, thank you for joining us, Darrell. You can catch Darrell each day on Sports Wrap Daily on our television streaming channel found on most smart TVs. We cover the latest sports news happening in Southern Nevada and all across the country.